And I'm not going to dance this time.
Ann Arbor's Talk Station, 1290 WLVY and the LucyAnn Lance Show. Our nonprofit spotlight coming up at the bottom of this hour. And each week on the show, here on these Saturday shows, we welcome in Damian Farrell, Damian Farrell Design, architecture firm here in Ann Arbor, and it's Damian on Design.
It is. Good morning. Good to be back again.
Look what I'm holding.
I know. Isn't that beautiful?
It is beautiful.
Yeah. Thanks to our guest this morning, Dennis King.
This is a replica tile of the Scripps Mansion. You can find these in the Scripps Mansion. And Dennis King is COO and former CEO of the prominent architecture firm Harley, Ellis Devereaux, which actually has had many different names over the years.
Yes, good morning. We've had 8 versions of our name over the 105 years that the firm has been in continuous operation.
And Harley has been the thread.
Harley is the continuity.
The continuity.
The firm began as
right.
Harley and Atchison in 1908, then became Harley Architect for about 20 years, then Harley and Ellington, Harley, Ellington, and Day, which is going to be a little bit about what we're talking about today. Then Harley, Ellington, Cowan, and Sturton, Harley, Ellington, Pierce Yee, Harley Ellis, beginning in 2000 with another local merger, and today Harley Ellis Devereaux.
A lot of history there in 105 years.
It's a wonderful, another example of a little bit of research shows up some wonderful threads that tie so much together that we've already started to talk about in this series.
This is our Michigan as a state of design as we explore the impact of design and the designers and architects throughout the ages. This tile that I'm holding was created in 2007.
Right. The Scripps Mansion was placed on the roster of historic places in 2007. And that tile was made as a commemorative of that achievement.
And the Scripps Mansion was one of the major pieces that your firm was responsible for?
Well, Clarence Day, who is one of our prominent partners over the years, designed the mansion just before he joined our firm. But it ties together in what is kind of a very interesting and even mysterious kind of story.
Mysterious?
Yes.
I love this already.
Share it today.
Great.
I'll start with just a little bit of background about Clarence Day. He was a Detroiter, born in 1886, graduated from Detroit's Central High School, and unlike today, did not attend college to become an architect. He simply went to work for several local Detroit architects, apprenticing for about a 10-year period once he got out of high school. And then he hung up his shingle and declared himself an architect. He did, according to the story, travel several times to Europe to pick up some style and flair from design there, but never had any formal college education. He practiced as a sole practitioner in mainly the Detroit area for about 20-25 years, doing residential commissions. And the northern Detroit area of Palmer Woods and Sherwood Forest bear probably 20 or 25 homes that Clarence Day designed in just that area alone.
Are they well preserved, Dennis? Are people aware of this?
Yeah, the Palmer Woods Association, I think it's called.
Great. All right.
Keeps tab and knows who the designers of most of the homes are in the area.
There are some bright spots in Detroit in that regard, thanks to some neighborhood associations. And while Detroit is grappling with some horrible budget problems and the threat of an emergency financial manager coming in, those are some brave souls that are holding down in those neighborhoods.
They are, and I grew up near that area.
Did you?
And have lots of fond memories, but that's fodder for another show. Running around Palmer Woods and Sherwood Forest.
But it certainly is evidence of the great architects that were in our midst in those days when those homes were built.
It's a great testament, I think, that these communities survived. I think of the work of Wallace Frost as well, that little community in Birmingham.
Yes, absolutely.
This Birmingham was a Bloomfield Hills, Birmingham, right?
Right.
And we've actually had the pleasure of working on two Wallace Frost houses in my career here in Ann Arbor. So it's tremendous that the people have got together and recognized the importance of these collections.
That's absolutely.
And maintain them and live in them, and you know.
So let's get to the mystery.
Yeah.
After Clarence's sole practitioner practice from about 1915 to about 1940, he apparently had bumped into Alvin Harley during those years, because Alvin Harley was also designing homes for some of Detroit's social elite in the same neighborhood.
Okay.
So apparently they got to know one another, as architects might, and Harley was able ultimately to attract Clarence Day to join the firm. And we were known as Harley, Ellington, and Day, as I mentioned, from 1943 until Day retired in 1959. A great period for our firm.
Yeah.
But what I'd like to talk about today is the Scripps Mansion, which was designed by Clarence Day before he joined our firm in the late 20s, from the period about 1927 to about 1929. As a matter of fact, that period in the late days of the Roaring '20s, there were 3 major mansions in the metropolitan Detroit area that were being designed simultaneously. The Scripps Mansion by Clarence Day, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but also at the very same time, Meadowbrook Hall, which was designed for Matilda Dodge Wilson, and it was the granddaddy of these 3 great mansions, was done in 1929, and that's some 88,000 square feet, just to give you some perspective.
Is it that big?
Yeah.
It was. It was.
It's a wonderful tour, by the way.
Wow.
And it's a wonderful facility today. It's obviously owned and run now by Oakland University, and they do a great job of taking care of that. Also in the same time period, the Edsel and Eleanor Ford House in Grosse Pointe Shores, 1927, 1928, designed by Albert Kahn. I should have mentioned, by the way, the Meadowbrook Hall designed by Smith, Henchman and Grills at the time, now called Smith Group.
Okay.
So these 3 mansions were sort of competing with one another for art and style and finesse as they were being designed all at the same time period. The Scripps Mansion was designed by Clarence Day, who actually beat out Albert Kahn and George Mason to design the house, as the story goes, although he had an edge because Clarence Day was the brother-in-law of Will Scripps, who owns the Scripps Mansion.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
yes. William and Nina Scripps commissioned the mansion, and Clarence Day obviously designed it. It's a wonderful, wonderful home. They occupied it from the time it was completed until the time of Will's death in 1952.
And by the way, he was the son of the founder of the Detroit News, I believe.
Exactly
Right.
right.
Yep.
And he went on himself to actually run the Detroit News after his brother-in-law George Booth had taken over the news. And then when he retired, Will Scripps took over as the leader of the Detroit News.
And that all led to Booth Publishing.
Exactly.
Right.
So there's a great history between the Booths and the Scripps,
Right.
and that whole family tradition. In 1952, following Will's death, the house sort of fell empty. His wife moved out. She didn't like living there by herself, and the house was empty. And in 1956, a gentleman by the name of Austin Ripley bought the home. Now, Austin Ripley, for the real history buffs, may remember that he was a fiction writer, and he wrote minute mysteries that were published in the newspaper. And it was a column, and he would tell a little mystery story, and the readers were sort of left to try to figure out and solve the mystery in the newspaper. That's a side story. Austin Ripley bought the home because he was a recovering alcoholic. And through that unfortunate experience, he had learned that there was in the Catholic Church a number of priests who were also recovering alcoholics. So Austin Ripley bought the Scripps Mansion, renamed it Guest House, and turned it over to the Catholic Church to become a retreat and recovery center for recovering alcoholic priests. And since then, in 1956, it's been closed, gated, and quiet to the public because it's been used for recovery for alcoholism and drug-related.
Do you mean that work
treatment.
is still going on there?
It is.
Only for people within the Catholic Church
within
hierarchy?
the Catholic Church. Somewhere along the way, a new recovery facility for priests was built, I believe, in Minnesota, and the Scripps Mansion then became a facility for recovering nuns. And until 5 years ago, they lived in and used the Scripps Mansion as a treatment center. Then on the same grounds, a new facility was built for the nuns, and they have relocated into that treatment facility. But Guest House, because of its charter and the way it has been set up, must be maintained as a educational and treatment center in order for it to maintain its ownership charter.
Dennis, did Austin Ripley ever live in the house, actually, or just give it to the church for these purposes?
I don't believe that he lived there himself. He went about the business of raising money. He wasn't able to do it all on his own, but he had some wealthy friends, and together they went to the Catholic diocese, as we understand the story, and they were able to provide some loans to help purchase the home. And ever since then, it's sort of been shrouded in mystery and essentially forgotten. So everybody knows about the Edsel and Eleanor Ford house, and everybody knows about Meadowbrook, but nobody knew about the Scripps Mansion.
And is it not referred to as the Scripps Mansion anymore?
No, it is. Well, it's called Guest House officially.
Okay.
But
And where is it?
it's out in Lake Orion, directly north of Detroit, probably 10 miles. It's not a difficult drive at all.
Is there any talk at all of ever opening it to the public?
Well, about 5 or 6 years ago, a local historian by the name of Leslie Pilak got interested in the mansion and started writing a history as a thesis. She was going to school for an additional degree and said, oh, this would be a great thesis. She dug up the entire history. They then asked her to take on a role, and for several years, once a year, they would open the home to tours. The residents would move out for the day, and the home would be open for tours for interested visitors. Leslie then began the process of starting an organization called the Friends of the Scripps Mansion. I was invited, as a matter of fact, and became a board member of that. Okay. But after a couple of years, something happened, and Guest House and the diocese determined that it was not in their best interest to have this become a public place. And unfortunately, I have to say, the board was dismantled, and the Friends of the Scripps estate no longer exists.
Oh.
So
what
it's
happens
gone back into clouded private use.
Behind the veil.
Behind the veil.
Is it being kept up from an architecture standpoint?
It is. As a matter of fact, a few years back, with Leslie's help, they applied for and achieved a grant from the Michigan Architectural Foundation, which is an organization that both Damian and I sit on the board of together.
Has been a feature of our show,
and they were successful in achieving a grant to help repair some of the grounds at the facility.
How interesting.